I want to welcome you to the 29th California Social Welfare Archives Annual Awards Reception. I'm Esther Gillies, President of the CSWA and your program host for today. And finally, I want to thank all of you, family, friends, social work colleagues, and others for sharing this special event with us. Your participation in recognizing the honorees inspires others in the social work community to aspire to levels of excellence as social workers and promotes and validates the importance of the work of the archives. We traditionally begin our events with a description of the CSWA. Today, we present a very brief film to do that for us. See if you recognize some familiar faces, both from the past and the present.
In 1979, the California Social Welfare Archives, CSWA, was established by a small group of dedicated social workers who were deeply committed to ensuring that the theories, knowledge, and understanding achieved by their generation were preserved for future scholars, social welfare advocates, and social workers. That the countless advances achieved in social welfare during past decades would not fade away and be forgotten, and that past and present information would always remain available to inform students, historians, and those influencing programs, legislation, and social justice in California. CSWA has evolved into a statewide, nonprofit organization affiliated with the USC School of Social Work and the USC Doheny Memorial Library Special Collections Department. Today, CSWA curates a rich, one-of-a-kind collection of social welfare documents and oral histories, which enables users to examine linkages between the past and present and develop deeper understandings of today's issues and create a historical foundation from which to address future social welfare problems and solutions. The archives houses over 400 collections of historical social welfare documents, some dating back to the 1880s. For example, CSWA holds the records of Rancho Los Amigos Hospital, which began as Los Angeles County's Poor Farm and became an internationally renowned rehabilitation hospital. CSWA's ever-expanding collection of over 125 oral history interviews, conducted over the past 3 decades, document the history and lessons of influential social workers and social welfare programs. These audio and video recordings have been accessed by thousands of visitors to the CSWA holdings and websites.
I've had many wonderful conversations with my grandparents and with my parents, but you know, those conversations are all lost now because they were never recorded. The oral histories are something that we're going to treasure for years to come because these are not personal memories as much as they are memories of people that have made important and significant contributions to social work practice and policy.
The California Social Work Hall of Distinction creates an ongoing legacy of the accomplishments of extraordinary social workers who have made significant and enduring contributions to California social welfare. Honorees are selected annually by a statewide panel of social workers and are inducted into the hall, where the impact of their exceptional contributions is documented and preserved for future generations. Today, social work schools throughout California include the study of historical figures and social welfare innovators, whose biographies and interviews can be found on the Hall of Distinction website. Each year, CSWA also presents George Nickel Awards, named after its founder, to outstanding contributors to the health and welfare of California. The Francis Lomas Feldman Excellence in Education Award was established in 2010 to acknowledge exceptional contributions to social work education in California. Join us today to to support the success and the future of the CSWA. Please visit www.usc.edu/CSWA.
So in brief, that's who we are. It's my distinct pleasure today to introduce our keynote speaker, Judge Michael Nash, recently retired presiding judge of the Los Angeles County Juvenile Court, the nation's largest juvenile court. He is with us today to speak to the changes that took place and the challenges he met during his 25 years on the bench, working with children and families in the child welfare system. Please welcome Judge Nash.
Well, good afternoon or good early evening to all. I'm really delighted to be here today. About 30 years ago, a little over 30 years ago, when I was a trial lawyer, I stood up before a jury and said, I'm not sure I know where to begin here. And then I proceeded to give a summation to the jury that took 7 days. So pull up a chair and relax. No, actually, what's challenging about tonight is that they said, oh, you can talk about 20 minutes. That's a challenge in and of itself. It usually takes me that long to sneeze. So let me get right into it. I've been very fortunate to have spent 25 of my 40 years in public service in working in our juvenile courts in both the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. I spent my first 15 years in public service in the criminal justice system as a prosecutor and a judge. And even though I have always suffered from what I like to refer to as a crusader mentality, I was very fortunate ultimately to land in the juvenile courts in 1990, where I found that I could take advantage of that so-called mentality. Now, to understand that, one has to understand the role of a juvenile court judge within that context. And everything that I'll at least attempt to talk about tonight really flows from understanding what the role of a juvenile court judge is. It's actually a very unique role, and in fact, in California, our standards of judicial administration have a section called the unique role of the juvenile court judge. And that unique role was best described or defined by a good friend of mine and also a mentor of mine, retired Judge Len Edwards from San Jose, California, who some of you may have heard of. And what he said was this: judges in the juvenile court are charged with keeping children safe, mentoring families, finding permanency for children, and holding youth, families, and service providers accountable. Every day, hundreds of judges make thousands of decisions regarding children in crisis. We decide whether a child should be removed from parental care, whether a child has committed a delinquent act, whether a child should be committed to the state for correction, whether parental rights should be terminated, and similar issues. When parenting fails, when informal community responses are inadequate, our juvenile courts provide the state's official intervention in the most serious cases involving children and families. We are the equivalent to the emergency room in the medical profession. We have to intervene in crises and figure out the best response on a case-by-case basis. In addition, we have to get off the bench and work in the community. We have to convene child and family-serving agencies, schools, and the community around the problems facing our most vulnerable and troubled children. We have to ask these agencies and the communities to work together to support our efforts so that the orders we make on the bench can be fulfilled. We have to be the champions of collaboration. So you see, the unique role of a juvenile court judge goes beyond the traditional role of a judge, which essentially is to act as a referee in the court process, or to call balls and strikes, as we sometimes say, and also to make factual and legal determinations where. Now, this role, the role of a juvenile court judge, encompasses leadership, administration, collaboration, advocacy, and engagement. We need to not only know the law, but also have an understanding of child development. What services are necessary to deal with the issues people in our courts face? What resources are available in given communities? And what are the best practices to effectively manage the process and the different roles that we play? Now, during my tenure in the juvenile court, there have been many changes and developments, many of which the court was involved with through this role, through this notion of collaboration I mentioned. And in the limited time I have here, let me just talk about a few of them. When I started in the dependency court in 1990, there were well over 50,000 children under our court's jurisdiction due to abuse or neglect. When I became presiding judge in 1997, I began keeping track on a monthly basis, and at that point, the number was over 53,000. Today, there are about 30,000. And a lot of people say, well, what's the reason for the decline? Well, there are probably a number of reasons, including the subsiding of the crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s and 90s, which really drove our caseloads through the roof at that time. I think there's been some better social work, which kind of ebbs and flows over time. And through collaboration, we developed our adoption project, which includes a program that many of you have heard about, our Adoption Saturday program, which we started in 1998 and has become a national program. And because of that program, we've seen the completion of some 35,000 adoptions from foster care since 1998, and certainly that has helped reduce our caseloads quite a bit. Yet when you think about it, that decrease sounds good to some, but I can tell you I am not satisfied. In April 2010, we had fewer than 24,000 children under our court's jurisdiction, the lowest number that certainly during the time that I was in the court that we had seen, and probably the only time the court had ever seen a number that low was when the numbers were at some point on the way up. 5 years later, here we are in April 2014, we have 30,000 plus children under our court's jurisdiction. And there's a number of reasons for that. There are increasing numbers of youth who are over the age of 18 who are staying in the system because primarily the Fostering Connections legislation that was passed in 2008 by Congress and which has seen various iterations here in California. Those numbers are rising, and in part, and in my opinion, because at the same time that we are focusing on, or have been focusing on, these young people who are aging out of the system to really negative outcomes, we have not seen a simultaneous redoubling of our efforts to create permanency for children in the system so that they do not stay in the system longer before they age out. During the same time frame, we have seen our local agency, DCFS, filing new cases at near record levels. And that may or may not be a good thing. But the thing is, I think all of us who work in the system need to ask why. We seem to accept the fact that, oh, we're in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is a very big jurisdiction, and therefore we're going to have a lot of cases. Well, that's fine and dandy. But we also need to ask, why do we have so many cases here in Los Angeles? Is our city worse than other places in the United States? We need to ask if the agency is maximizing its efforts to serve families in their community rather filing cases in the court that could be serviced better in the communities. We need to ask today if there has been a philosophical shift in social work regarding family maintenance. We need to ask what part, if any, politics and a climate of fear in the agency has played in this increase. There may be good answers to all these questions, but those questions need to be asked. They need to be asked by all of us, and we need to demand that there be a good answer to all of that. Because quite frankly, at the rate, speaking from the court's perspective, we've seen so many cases in the last few years that the court is literally drowning in cases. And when you talk about courts having minutes a day to spend hearing these cases, that does not create a climate for the best outcome for the children and families that we're trying to serve in our system. Now, during my time on the court, we also did, I think, some pretty good work. And here in Los Angeles, we developed some of the most comprehensive protocols regarding the use of psychotropic medications with our children. I'm proud of that. Yet, if each and every one of us who is involved in this process does not participate in a meaningful way, by that I mean if we don't treat each of these children who we're getting requests to medicate, if we don't treat each and every one of those children like our own children, then I can guarantee you that there will still be too many children receiving medication, too many children receiving too many medications, often for the wrong reasons, and ultimately without sufficient oversight. You know, I recently testified in front of our legislature on this issue related to psychotropic meds, and everybody's looking for magic solutions about how we can improve the process. What I said was, the bottom line is you can come up with any number of solutions about how to improve the process. But once again, we have to look at the process, so we have to look at what we're doing one child at a time. In our system, we work under the notion that we're dealing with one child at a time. Every child, every family that comes before us is unique in their own way, and that really is what the juvenile court is all about. That's why it was created in 1899, to recognize that children are different, children are unique, and every one of them needs to craft their own solution. And I don't know how many of you have children. I don't know how many of you have children who have taken medication, specifically psychotropic medication. But think about the process that you went through. Think about the questions that you asked your doctor. Think about how you understand and you know the nuances of your child's behavior. Think about how when you gave your child that medication, that you watched your child like a hawk because you wanted to see in what way, if any, that medication was helping or hurting your child or doing nothing at all. And unless everybody in the system joins their efforts or combines their efforts to attempt to do that, we can create all the protocols that we want, and it's not going to make any difference. Now, during my time in the juvenile court, we also developed protocols to increase the communication and coordination between our juvenile justice and our child welfare systems. And the good news is, I think that over the years, those protocols have reduced the number of children who come from the child welfare system, our dependency kids, who have ultimately become formal wards of the delinquency court. Yet, as I sit in court now, and people say, well, what are you doing in retirement? Well, I'm actually sitting now as a delinquency court judge. And I'm actually, it's a great opportunity for me to see if any of this stuff that we did over the years can actually work. And I've only been doing it now. I retired in January, and I've actually went back to work in March. So it's too soon for me to make any definitive statements. But I do believe that from what I've seen thus far, that if a lot of the stuff that we created is implemented in the way that we intended it to be, it can work. When it comes to these protocols that create communication and coordination between the delinquency court and the dependency court, between DCFS and the probation department, while the good news is we've reduced the number of kids who I think have crossed over, yet it's very clear there are still some real difficulties in getting the two systems to work together. And I question whether or not they really know how to work together, and at times, truthfully, I really question the desire of the agencies to do so. So there's still a lot more to do here. Now, over the years, a good thing is that there has been a decrease in the number of children and youth in group homes. This is a good trend. It's a good trend because, as I'm sure most of you know and understand, group homes are considered to be the least preferred placement for children, and for good reason. Children don't need and shouldn't be growing up in congregate care. Children should be growing up in a family environment. But there's other reasons why it's not a congregate care is not a good thing, and the data reflects this. The highest percentage of youth on psychotropic medications are youth in group homes. The highest percentage of youth who cross over from dependency court to delinquency court are from group homes. The highest percentage of African American children being disproportionately represented in our system is in group homes. The highest percentage of youth aging out of foster care is from group homes. The lowest levels of academic achievement are of youth in group homes. And the highest risk today of being targeted for commercial exploitation is for youth who are in group homes. Now, before I left, in the last year and a half ago, after a year and a half of negotiation, we actually created a protocol to enhance judicial oversight in this area. But once again, unless everyone in the system takes it seriously, these negative outcomes and these issues will persist in our system. Now, we also developed a protocol that requires timely reporting to the court every time a child's placement changes. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because, as we all know, the movement of children is one of the banes of our existence in our system. Children need stability, and the rate that we move children is almost criminal. There can be no stability in any aspect of our life, of their lives when we move them. And so, until we do a better job of placing children appropriately, rather than just putting them someplace, and I think you know what I mean by that, too often, and there are lots of reasons for this, but it's no excuse, too often the job, what we're doing is, well, can I find a bed for this child? Okay? And then we find a bed for this child and we put this child someplace. And I say put, because once again, we haven't matched that child with a placement that is designed to be successful for that specific child. And until we start doing that on a consistent basis, we're going to see this consistent moving of children, and we will never, ever, ever properly achieve the well-being of children in our system when we do that. And there are ways that can be done. Now, I see Esther giving me the high sign. I understand that. And as you might imagine, I could go on and on and on. 7 days might not be enough. But my attitude, as you see, is one of dissatisfaction with much of our system. And that includes myself, because I've been part of this system for so many years. And even though I am well aware and appreciate the fact that we do help a lot of people, and that's the beauty of it, that's what keeps us coming back to do this work day after day. But I'm not shy about telling you that I'm not satisfied here. And neither was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he said many years ago, "As long as there is poverty in the world, I can never be rich, even if I have $1 billion. As long as diseases are rampant and millions of people in the world cannot expect to live more than 28 or 38 years, I can never be totally healthy, even if I just got a good checkup at the Mayo Clinic. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the way the world is made." So the way I look at this, as long as there are more than 30,000 children in our child welfare system in Los Angeles, many of whom are not getting what they need, what they deserve, and what they are entitled to as children, that is a safe, healthy, loving, permanent home, which every child that was ever created by God is entitled to, then I'll tell you, I'm with Dr. King. So, thank you so much for listening to me today. If anybody has any questions about anything, I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, I don't see him.
She wants to know a little bit about the adoption day. Let me tell you, in the 1990s, ASFA was passed, and that really changed some of the dynamic of child welfare, because through ASFA, it put much more of an emphasis on permanence, and some of the legal changes said, well, we're going to create more categories where the system is not going to even allow reunification for certain families, for certain types of abuse and so forth. And we're going to shorten the time frames for reunification, specifically for younger children. And so what we saw as a result of ASFA is that and those legal changes that impacted our states as well, was that more and more children were being freed for adoption. And got to around 1997, 1998, in Los Angeles, we had a backlog of some 6,000 children for whom parental rights had been terminated. And of course, we terminate parental rights in California for the purposes of allowing children to be adopted. When we looked at the system was not responding appropriately. And really, it was a system-wide issue. So in late 1997, I got together with a couple of local entities, the Alliance for Children's Rights and Public Counsel, and we got together with DCFS and some of the attorneys in the system. He said, look, we have to figure out a way that we can somehow reduce this backlog and begin to expedite the time that it takes to complete adoptions. So what happened was that the Alliance and Public Counsel agreed to go out and recruit, organize, and train attorneys from some of the largest law firms in Los Angeles. And these attorneys were trained to take cases pro bono, wherein they would help families navigate the often complex adoption process. At the same time, the Department of Children and Family Services agreed that they would put more social workers working on adoption, provide overtime and so forth. And the court said, what we will do is we're going to provide more courts and more time to actually do the adoption hearings. After we put this adoption project together, an attorney had an idea that maybe here's how we can do this. We can do it in kind of an assembly line fashion. We can have all the families come to our attorney's offices on a Saturday to do their paperwork, and then we'll march them right over to the court to complete the adoptions. Well, I said, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You can't do it that way. But there's an idea there. On one Saturday, you can bring your families together and you can work on paperwork, and then perhaps on another Saturday, we can open up the courts and do adoption hearings. And so in April of 1998, actually 17 years ago, April 15th, tax day, we opened up 5 courts one Saturday morning, and we processed 150 adoptions. 115 adoptions, and the rest was history. It was a big hit. It was a hit because we invited the media, who generally speaking don't get to go to the dependency court. Families were able to bring more friends and more families to help them celebrate. The attorneys didn't have to be in other courts on that day, and it was a huge celebration. I've often said, our dependency court, which is not typically a happy place, became the happiest place on earth on that day. And we did it time and time again. In fact, we're still doing it. And in fact, on one Saturday in 1998 or 1999, we actually completed 650 adoptions in one day. And as I said, since then, this project, which actually we have courts available every day, we've completed over 35,000 adoptions from foster care. And over 10,000 of them have actually occurred on those Saturdays. So it's something that we're very proud of. And of course, everybody around the country wanted to copy us. So now, the Saturday before Thanksgiving every year becomes National Adoption Day. And every year now, courts in all 50 states open their door to complete adoptions. And so on that one Saturday throughout the country every year, 3,000 to 4,000 children have their adoptions from foster care completed. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Sure. We have one quick question on this side, and to be fair, we're giving one quick question to that side.
Hi, my name is Jay Lighton. I'm a graduate student here at USC in the MSW program. My question for you is, based on the cases that you observe, when you're on the bench, do you think it would help if there were social workers who were able to follow their clients as they move from site to site? I don't think that's currently implemented at the moment. And then my other question for you is, do you think that if social workers had more training when they are on the front lines, we only get 2 years here in the MSW program, is that enough to deal with these complex issues, especially when they come up to your level?
Well, the first question is a good one, because one of the things that children in our system suffer from is a lack of continuity. Once again, we've heard they move around way too often. They change social workers way too often. They change attorneys way too often. And quite frankly, it used to be more so than now, they change judges more often, because when I started in the dependency court in 1990, judges were in and out. And one of the things that we worked on over the years was creating more stability within the court system. And we've had a lot more stability, and a lot of kids, I've heard this time and time again over the years, the only consistent person in their lives for many years was their judge. And so, we need to, give these kids a lot more consistency than they get. And that's certainly one way to do it. As far as your second question is concerned, you know, the training issue is a hard issue. You know, at the end of the day, you know, experience is the best trainer. And I think that there's only so much you can do in the courtroom, in the classroom. There's only so much that you can do through simulation. But at least if we're going to do a lot more, if we're going to do training in the field, then social workers need to be out there with trained, experienced social workers so they can benefit from the experience of those social workers. In terms of how long it takes, really, it doesn't matter what profession we're in, whether you're a judge, a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, or a social worker, experience is the best teacher.
Judge Nash, under DCFS cases, they're under the name of the mother. In many situations, whether in family court and dependency court, it always seems, or many times, that fathers seem to be pulled, if you will, in terms of attention that's paid to them, either within the case. And I'm curious, what has been your role, or what's possibly can the court do, where fathers, especially if they don't reside in the home, seem to be out of the picture and sometimes not taken very seriously. And even though they long to be with their children, long to connect with them, they seem to be left out. Any thoughts?
Yes, you know, fathers have long been the forgotten folks involved in the process. And one of the things that we've concentrated more on over the years, a couple of things we've concentrated more on. Number one is really trying to get everybody in our system to at the front end of the system, make sure that they identify the parents of the child. And once again, more often than not, that means the father, okay? Because fathers can bring as much to the table as mothers. And one of the more important things that they can bring to the table, along with just their own commitment, is they have families as well. They have families for these children that can bring so much to the table, whether it's assistance to the parents who are reunifying, whether it's placements for the children, supports for the children in so many different ways. And we haven't done a good job of that, but we've gotten better at it. And of course, largely, or to a great extent, through the efforts of one of my great friends, the late Dr. Herschel Swinger, of Children's Institute, he more than anybody else, you know, really emphasized the creation of programs that are designed to help and empower fathers to be, who are willing and able and desirous to become a positive force in the lives of their children. And he created the Fatherhood Project. And one of the things that I'm proud of is that working with Children's Institute, we were able to provide space at the Children's Court in Monterey Park for the Fatherhood Project so that the fathers can go directly from the courtroom to the office of the Fatherhood Project and begin to enroll in these programs that are designed, once again, to help them become, you know, major forces in the lives of their children. But we need more of that. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Judge Nash. I'm just regretting that we don't have 7 days. You packed a great deal in the 20 minutes that you had. Thank you so very much. The George D. Nickel Awards were established by the CSWA Board in 1987 in honor of the man identified by Francis Feldman as the primary founder of the CSWA. The awards have been made each year since to individuals whose contributions to California social welfare have been outstanding and warrant special attention and recognition. Today, we have several past recipients of the George Nickel Awards present at this event. way back as far as 2002. Barbara Solomon. Is Barbara here? Barbara? Monica White. Ralph Fertig. You just raise your hand, Ralph. Wendy Smith. And David Kuroda. Sue Dvorak Peck. Marlene Wong. And Ron Astor. We celebrate this 29th honors event to pay tribute to social workers and community activists who have made significant contributions to social welfare in California. And we are privileged to have with us today Marilyn Flynn, Dean of the USC School of Social Work, who will present the 2015 George D. Nickel Award for Outstanding Contributions to Social Welfare. Dean Flynn.
This year, we are honoring Judge Michael Nash for his outstanding contributions to social welfare. I knew you were going to have trouble being brief when I looked at your biography, and I saw that you co-prosecuted the longest criminal trial in the history of our country. It was the Hillside Strangler serial killer. This is, of course, a better subject, but it shows your capacity, certainly. I think I remember Judge Nash personally most when I interviewed him as part of my responsibility for the Blue Ribbon Commission on Child Protection. And I sat transfixed in his office for 2.5 hours. I ran out of paper. I had expected to take a few notes, and I ran out of ink. It's clear that he's made an enormous contribution already to social welfare history in Los Angeles and across the country. His eyes are really fixed on what it takes to change our child welfare system and, more importantly, our capacity to unify and support and sustain families. He really understands that we have to impact the personnel, the protocols, the community resources, the partnerships, the training. He understands that it takes a village. He's a passionate leader. I think you heard the passion in his voice. He has a special role, and I think you got a flavor of that today, as a purveyor of hope. He honestly believes that his role has been to give hope to families, not to give judgment and not to create separation and depression. He's been very forthright in promoting public understanding, so his passion is not just confined to the courtroom, but it has impacted every one of us through the media and through his many public appearances. In fact, he's a goading force for good. He's left major advances, and you've already heard some of them. He's established a new beginning for partnerships for children and families in Los Angeles, and much of his work is really organized around coordination, collaboration, connection, making the linkages so children have a path, a connection in their lives, together with their families. He has helped to reduce the number of children in congregate care, and as you heard, he deeply understands the adverse effects of children from remaining in congregate care, and improve the oversight of children who are receiving psychotropic medication. I'm glad he got to talk to you about his adoption Saturday in Los Angeles and the enormous impact that this has had across the entire country. He's been a leader in several state and national organizations, and those are listed or identified in your program, including the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. And he's received numerous recognitions. This recognition, I think, is a special one, Judge, because it comes from the social work community, and all you have done both to make connections with the social work community, but also to point out to us what yet remains to be done. Thank you.
I really appreciate this for a number of reasons. A lot of people think and have thought over the years that I didn't like social workers. I love social workers. Social workers are some of the most noble, hardworking, dedicated people in our world today, and we need more and more of them. That's a simple fact. We need more and more of them. I'm also delighted to get this because as a graduate of UCLA and a UCLA diehard, to receive this at USC is pretty cool. But it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, or whether you're a Bruin or a Trojan. When it comes to our kids, we all want the same thing, what I said before. We want our kids, all of our children, to grow up in safe, healthy, loving, permanent homes, period. So thank you very much for this.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hatanaka, the Executive Director of Special Services for Groups, an adjunct associate professor in the USC School of Social Work. He will present the 2015 George Nickel Award for Outstanding Contributions to Social Work by a Social Worker. Dr. Hatanaka, there you are.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor for me to do this. Bill and I are, I think we're 41 years friends and colleagues. And he and I understand what Part A and Part B is. Who's laughing? Okay. So, and as Judge Nash was saying, Bill and I are alums from that other place across town. And I see his homies are over there on a table with George Nunn, so thank you for supporting the archives. But I want to talk to you about Bill. I think a lot of you know this. He has had a very distinguished career. In 1980, he was the founder and the first and only executive director of Little Tokyo Service Center until he retired. But as director, he developed LTSC as the premier community-based multi-service agency serving the Japanese community, not just in Los Angeles, but Southern California. 150 staff, services to all age groups, services that include childcare, youth programs, family counseling, parenting classes, affordable housing, and business development in Little Tokyo. And what LTSC is very well known for is a full range of services to older adults. He also led a good social worker, a very distinguished career leading community development in Little Tokyo. Bill was instrumental in maintaining as well as changing the face of Little Tokyo, which has been a part of the downtown landscape for over 130 years, a place where many of our ancestors came to this country, and that was their first stop. Through LTSC, he led the development of affordable housing. He was a part of developing Little Tokyo as a thriving arts community. He was instrumental in developing a sports complex, and importantly, the preservation of historic sites in Little Tokyo. He also founded the Little Tokyo Historical Society and the National Asian Pacific Islander Historic Preservation Forum. And get this one, in 2007, Bill was recognized as the preservation hero by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So is that one you got a t-shirt with a big S on it? Is it? And lastly, true to our craft as social work professionals, his career is distinguished by his involvement in advocacy, social justice, and program development for the underserved. He was one of the founders and the past president of the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council, APCON. He was one of the co-founders of the Asian Pacific Counseling and Treatment Center, and the co-founder of the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Human Trafficking. He has been a part of hundreds of demonstrations, testified at legislative hearings, been part of many campaigns on behalf of the most vulnerable and oppressed in our communities. But you know, when I was asked to do this and I was thinking about the significance of Bill's career and why he is so deserving of this award, I think about what I tell my students, my second year COPA and leadership students who are about to graduate and are literally hot to trot in advancing their careers in our profession. So I stress upon them the core values of social work professionals. You all know them: service, social justice, the dignity and worth of our people that we serve, the profound value of human relationships, integrity, competence, cultural competence, and social diversity. I tell my students to work hard, take every advantage and opportunity to advance your career, but work is equally hard to build a career based on the foundation of these values. At the end of the day, it's those values that will define you as a social work professional. So I tell them when I think of social work colleagues who have led distinguished careers in our profession, I think about my colleagues whose practice is defined not only by their accomplishments, but by these core values. And when I think of people that fall into this category, I think of Bill Watanabe as one of those distinguished professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, the awardee for professional services, Bill Watanabe.
Well, thank you, Herb, for your introduction. I'm glad it didn't cover 41 years, but it's been a long friendship, and we've been working together for many, many years. Also, thank you to USC and California Social Welfare Archives, and for the friends and family who came out tonight to support me. I'd like to recognize Jane Kurihara. Jane was at UCLA, and she's the one who helped me to get into the School of Social Work there and has sort of been guiding me my entire career. I got my social work degree, my MSW, in 1972 in a field called community organizing. And at UCLA back then, there were like 3 options: casework, group work, and community organizing. And I'm so glad to see that the UCLA Luskin School bought an ad for both Judge Nash and myself. My daughter was wondering if it pained UCLA to cut a check, but we actually worked together fairly well, and so that was nice to see. A few years ago, when Barack Obama was running for president the first time, they mentioned that he had worked a few years in Chicago as a community organizer. And I thought, wow, a person who wants to be president was working as a community organizer, and I thought, that is so cool. And what great experience for someone who aspires to be the president. And then a few days after I heard this in the paper, apparently Sarah Palin made the comment, community organizing, that's not a real job. Well, I have to disagree with Sarah Palin. No surprise, but community organizing is not only a real job, it's one of the best jobs in the world. I mean, you get to work with people in the community, in the neighborhood, trying to empower them to make change, to improve their environment for themselves and for generations to come. Now, what better job can you ask for than that? You get to change the world, really, one community, one neighborhood at a time. Now, my community was, and when I was working at the Little Tokyo Service Center, was Little Tokyo, and then the broader Japanese American community. And then beyond that, like another circle, would be the Asian American community. And then beyond that would be the low-income folks who needed help, and then anybody else who maybe would come to our doors and need help. And I'd like to ask Yasuko Sakamoto and Evelyn Yoshimura if you would stand so people can see you. Stand, raise your hand, stand. Now these two ladies, 35 years ago, these two ladies and we were the first staff at Little Tokyo Service Center. And so that was our neighborhood. We decided that LTSC was going to be a great agency, and we agreed on some core values. When I retired after 32 years, we were still together, working together. And I think that is a commitment that you don't find too often these days. And they're still there. They're still there working. I also wanted to introduce Alan Nishio. Alan Nishio was on our board for many, many years. And over the 32 years, he was on the board for most of that time and was board president for much of that time. But I heard he couldn't make it tonight. But Alan was a great part of our work there in Little Tokyo. In 1965, I'm sure you all know, I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the choir, but there was a great immigration reform that took place. And I felt that Los Angeles was really a great social experiment. How do you provide services to such a diverse and multiplicity of ethnicities, cultures, and languages? And that was a huge challenge, and I felt that Little Tokyo Service Center was a key part of that service delivery system. Today, Little Tokyo Service Center, we have staff that speak probably 6 or 7 different Asian languages, as well as Spanish and English, of course, but providing services in that neighborhood. And I'd like to ask Dean Masabayashi if he would stand. Dean is now the executive director of the Little Tokyo Service Center. And so he's been the executive director for the past 3 years now. And I hope tonight, when you go home, if you have a chance, if you can't fall asleep, check out the website, Little Tokyo Service Center, and see the work that they're doing and the great work that Dean and the staff are still doing, because they're still involved, changing the community, making neighborhoods better, one at a time, every day, for a better world. Thank you.
Although the CSWA has been conducting oral history interviews since the early 1980s, our first video oral history was conducted in 2005. In it, Phyllis Massing asked Frances Lomas Feldman, a founding member of the CSWA, "What was your most gratifying work?" Her response, "Helping social workers in name only, not by profession, to recognize the value of professional education and go and get it, and to have an impact on others as a result of getting a professional education." In 2010, the CSWA introduced the Frances Lomas Feldman Excellence in Education Award in honor of Frances Feldman. This award recognizes an individual who has demonstrated exceptional qualities in the area of social work education, whether as a scholar or as an educator. With us today are two prior recipients of this recognition. Dr. June Brown. Dr. Brown, can you raise your hand? And Dr. Bruce Jansen. Today we are privileged to have with us Dr. Barbara Solomon, Professor Emerita, USC School of Social Work, and Vice Provost Emerita at USC, to present the 2015 Frances Lomas Feldman Excellence in Education Award. Dr. Solomon.
When I was called a few months ago by the Office of the California Social Welfare Archives, asking if I would be interested in introducing this year's recipient of the Frances Lomas Feldman Award for Excellence in Education, I was not just willing to accept, I felt deeply honored. Frances Lomas Feldman had been my mentor, who had committed herself to social work and gave me an idea of what social work could really be. But when I was told who would be the recipient, I knew immediately that I not only was honored, but I had to be the one to introduce her to you. Because I'm going to be introducing someone whose work and whose life has reflected so much of my own life, but also of the profession and of our nation. We share so much history. We both grew up in our formative years in this country's segregated South, where Jim Crow was the name of the game. We both received our undergraduate degrees in the same year from historically black colleges. We both came west to this golden state that promised opportunities we could only have dreamed of in the segregated schools of Darlington, South Carolina, and Houston, Texas. We both, of course, chose social work as the profession that we would commit to for the rest of our lives. We both loved what we practiced so much that we wanted to learn as much as possible about how to be really effective. And then we wanted to teach others aspiring to join us. We both chose the University of Southern California to pursue a doctoral degree that opened sesame to academic careers. We were both told that the university didn't hire their own doctoral graduates, the incest rule. We were surprised but elated when the incest rule was waived and we were invited to join the faculty. We both loved teaching, especially the students, but were somehow persuaded to move into administration, and we loved that too. We both eventually retired, planning only to spend more time with the husbands who were the winds beneath our wings, who had supported us and made our success possible, and to be able to spend more time with the children and now the grandchildren that we adore. But in spite of all these things we've shared, there is in fact something else that makes Dr. Frances Capel exceptional. Frances Capel, even after retirement, has remained connected tightly to the social work profession. You can read her biographical statement in the program, but it doesn't really reflect the fact that she's been drawn back into continuing professional roles, sought after by social work programs and agencies fervently wishing to make use of her value as the consummate teacher, the consummate mentor. This continuing tight after-retirement connection has come about because she has demonstrated consummate mastery of a skill that is the trademark that distinguishes us in the helping professions. The skill that we are told we all must master, whether we are macro or micro, therapists, community organizers, or social policy analysts. A skill for which there is no perfectly valid and reliable calculator we can use when measuring a social worker's competence. This skill is the ability to establish an empathic understanding of and relationship with those whose lives have been significantly different from our own. Empathy makes it possible to practice tough love, not only for an unruly child or abusive parent experiencing problems in living. It's somewhat harder when those problems in living are being presented by the violent, the hateful, the unrepentant. It is even harder when it is the culturally insensitive agency administrator or the overburdened, burned out faculty colleague who is creating problems for others. But Frances Capel has been able to master that skill. She has made a career, even after retirement, of making the hard seem, after all, quite possible. She is the exemplary empathic problem solver, empathic healer. So it is with profound admiration and appreciation that I now ask Dr. Frances Capel to come forward to receive the Frances Lomas Feldman Award for Excellence in Education.
Hold me a year or two.
Take this out of your way.
No, these are mine.
Oh, okay, I don't want to take yours.
Here you go. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Here's your program. I'm catching my breath. Those of you who know me for public speaking know I have to catch my breath. I have been having an absolutely marvelous, marvelous, marvelous day today, having reunion, as it were, with some family members that I haven't seen in a while and some that I see frequently. Friends, colleagues, former students, you name it, they all have fallen in wonderful categories, and I have just been enjoying myself very much today. But I must tell you that in the weeks since I received word that I had been selected for this year's Frances Lomas Feldman Excellence in Education Award, I have been flooded with emotional reactions. Some of them are harder to define than others, but the ones that stand out the most to me are these. I feel blessed, and I don't want to cry, and honored, and grateful, and humbled. I want to tell you about some of the thoughts that ran through my mind as I reflected on being named for this award. First, I consider it a tremendous honor to be recognized by persons not directly familiar with nor affected by my work.
and to have my educational career labeled excellent. This is a tremendous honor. Then to recommend that I receive the Francis Lomas Feldman Award for Excellence in Education has just been an overwhelming thought at times, and certainly very heartwarming for me. Professor Feldman was my teacher, my mentor, and my colleague at USC School of Social Work. I know firsthand how much excellence was part of everything she taught or promoted or directed. So I want to thank very much the board of the California Social Welfare Archives for this honor. As to the blessing, there are many facets to this, and I could go on all afternoon about that, but overall, I feel blessed to be here in California. My life has taken some wonderful turns to bring me here, and you heard Dr. Solomon chronicle our parallels, as it were, and I wasn't even aware myself until she did that today, that we had so many parallels. But my life has taken some wonderful turns to bring me here. I was born in South Carolina, and some of you may have heard me say from time to time one of my grandmother's standard quotes: "Things always work out for the best." Well, as a child, I used to say, "Yeah, Grandma," under my breath, of course. But as I reflected during these past weeks, I remember that when I finished Benedict College, a historically black college in Columbia, South Carolina, Strom Thurmond, who was governor, declared that he would close the state school if integration was ordered by the federal government. I had been prepared in college to teach in public schools, and I thought, well, why should I look for a job that could be ended even before I began? So I took off for other parts of the country, and later was married to my husband, Fred, and we moved to California. Grandma was right. Despite Strom Thurmond's threat, which of course did not come true, but it sure felt unsettling at the time, I found a most rewarding future by leaving South Carolina. We may have to wait a while, but things do have a way of working out for the best. Now, while this award has my name on it, I am blessed again and humbled by the fact that I could never have achieved excellence all by myself. And I have to tell you a bit about how I think this came about, that Francis Smalls Capel would be standing here today receiving this acknowledgement of essentially a life's work. There are many people in this picture. First, back to my grandma. She was my first social work educator. She was a compassionate woman who truly taught me how to be with people, how to be empathic, and how to be of help to others. Her influence was far-reaching. My two siblings and I were in her care after school every day. And there's no wonder to me that my brother Pat and my sister Charlotte, who is here today and completed her MSW at USC. Raise your hand, Charlotte, so they can see who you are. It's no wonder that we all became social workers. Then there were my parents who emphasized excellence in all things: schoolwork, chores, you name it. If it's worth doing, do it right. My mother owned and operated a print shop, and for sure there was little or no room for error in that business. Then along came my husband, Fred. I could never have found someone so encouraging of everything I have done, especially related to my educational and work goals. If I said, I'm thinking about this or that, he would say, do it. He has always encouraged me, even as he did his work as a general contractor, and he took the lead in parenting and household duties while I concentrated on school especially. I know I could not have been excellent in my work if he had not been there. Alongside him was my son David, who did his part during my MSW study, and my daughter Allison, who was here by the time I began the PhD work. Thank you all. Would you all just raise your hands so people can see who you are? And in case you're wondering who those darling children are, those are my grandchildren. Finally, there was the School of Social Work itself here at USC. I had so many blessings and opportunities at this school. I chuckle because I think I worked hard too. I have reflected on the contributions of my deans, Hamovich, who gave me the first opportunity to teach and who encouraged me to continue, even though I was sure I could not do it again after the first time. He said, with your sense of humor, I said, I had no sense of humor. It was totally gone. Then there was Dean Roberts, who encouraged me to apply for an academic position with a co-appointment as director of the school's social work program. There was Dean Patty, who did the thing that Dr. Solomon talked about, pulled me out of the classroom and brought me in as his first-time Associate Dean for Academic and Student Affairs in the school. Now, this was back in the day when it was a small school and we only had one such person. Now it's just a wonderfully large school, Maryland. You're just going on. And then Dean Flynn, with whom I continued as Associate Dean until my retirement. She didn't kick me out of the office. Each of these deans gave support, not always with extra compensation, mind you, for the position that I continued to hold throughout my years at the school. Now, you see, I was teaching in the first part, and then I was doing academic deaning in the second part, but always doing the school social work program. This is social work in the public schools program. There are a few school social workers in the room. But none of these deans ever sought to curtail or direct my activities in the program. There was always a green light. Just do it. This left me free to interact with the various state regulatory agencies that determine what programs should include and whether our program met the criteria, to participate at state and national levels of NSW as a member of the Commission on Education, the National Board of Directors, the editorial board of the Journal of Social Work in Public Schools, and to participate in the California Association of School Social Workers as president and board member, and thereby establishing working relationships and networks across the state. I'm especially proud of what we were able to accomplish in terms of growth and prominence of our school social work program. School social work has always been a part of the master's preparation at USC. When I started, we were one of only 3 schools of social work in the state that had an approved program. Thanks to Shirley Fennell, who was my teacher and who preceded me as director of the program. Now, nearly all, if not all, schools offer this possibility for securing credentials in this area. Also, when I started, there was one year we had only 1 student enrolled in the program, and she's here today. That's Becky McCullough. 1 student. But since that time, USC has had several hundreds of students graduate with the ability to meet the requirements for the credential and move forward to provide vital services to the children of public schools in the state, especially the LA Unified School District. My teaching duties were similarly gratifying, notwithstanding my earlier comment about what I said to Dean Hamovich. And some of my former students are here today, and I thank you for coming. As to my work as Associate Dean, I started with some concern that I wasn't cut out for that work either, but I absolutely enjoyed it, and had some of the most gratifying experiences and successes in that office. I passed? To sum it up then, the deans, all of my teachers, my mentors, June Brown, Barbara Solomon, Bruce Jansen, my colleagues, notably Stephen Hayden, who's here. Hey, Steve. Who worked closely with me on the school social work program after he joined the faculty. All of my students, all of the clients with whom I've had the privilege of working are added to the list of folks who have contributed to my ability to demonstrate excellence in education. So on behalf of my grandmother, my parents, my Fred, and all who followed, I accept with humble gratitude this Francis Lomas Feldman Excellence in Education Award. Thank you.
Before we bring our program to a close today, the CSWA wishes to announce the inauguration of the Madeline Stoner and Ralph Fertig Social Work Scholar Award. Both Ralph and Madeline have been exceptional contributors to social welfare in California. Both have served as members of the CSWA board, and both have been recipients of the George Nickel Award. Now, as a result of a generous contribution to the CSWA from Ralph and Madeline's family, the award will be made annually to a USC MSW student. This year's recipient is Joseph Wise, MSW, COPA student. Joseph is completing his second-year internship with the CSWA. Congratulations, Joseph, and thank you, Ralph. Ralph, can you raise your hand so people can see you? And I want to thank all of you for your support, for your attendance today. We look forward to seeing all of you at future events. And do make sure that we do not leave any food, so stop by the food tables on your way out. Thank you again.
I do.